Okay, we're going to look at a very obscure title, 7th Cavalry, by a very obscure individual and an even more obscure company. The strange thing is about this game, and it's practically a homemade game, is the rules. There are no credits anywhere as to the designer. Nowhere. Nor even the company. Now, I happened to look it up on Board Game Geek, and I had remembered the fellow's name from having the game back in the 70s. The designer was Dave Casciano, and he called his company the Attack Wargaming Society. I think they only did maybe 2 or 3 games. And like I said, it's practically a homemade game. I bought the game in the 70s. I think that's when it came out. And I really liked it. It concerns tactical warfare during the Indian Wars. And I mean tactical. We're talking almost man-to-man level. Each counter represents between 2 and up to 50 men. And it's a generic game with many, many scenarios. And I'll show you the rules and the components and talk a little bit about the game. I won't be able to show you any moves because the edition I now have is unpunched. And I don't want to punch the counters to this game. I'll get to that in a moment. But let's take a look at the rule book. And it's really something interesting to behold. It's literally 1, 2, 3 pages of rules, fine printed in paragraph form, and the rest is scenarios. And there's 10 scenarios in it. I'll just mention the scenarios so you'll get an idea of what the game covers. Scenario number 1 is the Fetterman Massacre. Scenario 2 is the famous Wagon Box Fight. Scenario 3 is Pumpkin Buttes. Scenario 4 is the Battle of the Rosebud. Scenario 5 is Reno at the Bighorn. Scenario 6 is Custer at the Little Bighorn. And Scenario 7 is What If Custer Had Brought Gatling Guns. Scenario 8 is the Battle of Whitebird Creek. Scenario 9 is a Otis versus Sitting Bull scenario. And Scenario 10 is kind of the embarrassing Wounded Knee. It's a solitaire scenario. Wounded Knee, of course, was not really a battle, but really a disgraceful massacre. It's almost a guilty pleasure playing that scenario. I feel guilty playing it. It's a good game. I really liked it. I played the devil out of it back in the 70s, practically wore out the counters. And herein is some of the problems with the game. Being a homemade game, he did a host of counters, and I'll show you them close in a moment. But what really hurt the game a lot was the cardstock it was mounted on. It was very, very thin cardstock indeed. The brown are your Indian units mounted. Blue, of course, are your cavalry units mounted. The white units are cavalry units dismounted. And the Indian units that are white represent them dismounted also. And you get these generic counters for horses. You also got civilians, and we'll take a closer look in a moment. But like I said, the counters were on such thin stock, it was very difficult to play it. I'd always thought about remounting these counters, but it would be a huge amount of work because they are double-sided. I'd have to make copies, and it would be a lot of work to get this game up to modern standards. Now, the map was a kind of a generic terrain map because his scenarios were all fought on this map, of course, and he had to have generic terrain and some specific terrain for certain scenarios. So, for example, the Fetterman Massacre scenario, you'd play in this hill region along the edge of the board. For the Little Bighorn campaign, you also used the hills, and this stream would represent the Little Bighorn. There was a scenario for Pumpkin Buttes where the Indians could then hide in the woods, and you could ambush these civilians and trappers as they moved across the board. You've got these hills, and of course this would represent prairie. So not a real pretty looking board, but it was certainly functional. Okay, this is an example of the mounted cavalry units, and I'll explain the numbers. Like I said, they are in very thin stock. I even have trouble picking this up, even with the tweezers. You can see they're very, very thin. They are double-sided. There's a heck of a lot of wasted space with blank counters here, and those are horses. Now, explain the numbers. The number here on the left is the fire value and the range, so 4 hexes. That's the melee value, and this is the defense value. And of course, if you flip over, most of these numbers will be reduced to reflect that the unit is taking casualties. So that's mounted cavalry. Now here's some mounted Indian units. And what I really liked about this game, because it's so tactical, he's got various weapon systems, which I thought was really cool. I really liked it for this reason. For example, here's some Springfield units that the Indians have. These are units with muskets. These are bow and arrow units, lance units, and tomahawk. Notice there's no fire value in the tomahawk, being just a melee weapon. And of course, you got the flip side showing you the unit at reduced status. So I thought that was really cool, having the different types of units. You've got those are your horse counters. They're all, of course, zeros. Horses don't fight. That's their defense value if fired upon. And you've got some cool chief units, leader units. You've got infantry. Infantry are dismounted, so they're white. And you can see the infantry here has a fire factor of 3 and a range of 10. That's your rifled muskets. Melee value of 4, defense value of 3. These are civilians. You've got generally a fire factor of 2, range of 4, because the civilians usually had pretty good weapons with them. Of course, there's your infantry dismounted with reduced fire values. You've got some neat leader counters for the cavalry. I guess I'm not sure that is a lieutenant. I think that's a captain. That'd be a sergeant. And you've got some artillery, fire factor 4, range 10. You've got some cool looking Gatling guns. And you've got some civilians here with Winchesters and Henrys, fire factor 4, range of 8. These are kind of deadly units. So that's a little preview of what the units look like. Now the Indians had dismounted status too. So for example, there would be a dismounted Indian with Winchesters, fire factor of 5, range of 10, melee of 3, and defense of 3. So you got a whole host of units with this game. There was lots of units because it was very tactical. As I mentioned, depending on the scenario, the counters could represent between like 2 to 4 men up to about 50 men for the larger battles like Custer's Last Stand. So I just love the game because of the subject. I guess it's inevitable that one would want to compare the 7th Cavalry game to Michael Taylor's very fine series on the Indian Wars. But it's really apples and oranges. Michael's scale is quite different than 7th Cavalry. Michael's games are more on the operational level. I've got all 3 of them: Adobe Walls, Little Bighorn, and Rosebud Creek. And they are fine games. I really like them. There's just something about 7th Cavalry that I keep coming back to. I think it's because it covers smaller battles that I'm very interested in. These are, of course, one box, one game type battles. And there's only 3 of them. Well, with this one I can do at least 10 different scenarios. So I do like the tactical aspects of this game, and it'd be nice to see this thing back in print, but there's just no way that's going to happen. I've tried to contact Dave Casciano for several years. I can't seem to find him. He might have ducked out of the hobby. I just don't know. If anybody knows what happened to him, I'd love to hear from him. I'd like to redo this game, actually, or do a game that's very similar. In many ways, it reminds me of the old Rifle and Saber and Grenadier games that SPI used to produce, in that it's a generic system with a bunch of scenarios, a generic map, which is just more looking at a period rather than a single battle. So there's not much more I'm going to say about 7th Cavalry. I mean, I can't show you the any movement or battles. I just don't want to punch these counters. Like I said, they're so super thin, you have trouble picking them up. But if you ever get a chance to pick up the game, I think you should. But good luck finding it. It seems to be very rare. So that's it for 7th Cavalry by Dave Casciano and the Attack Gaming Society. Thank you for watching.